FOXSOUL mates. It is Friday, February 3rd. Go Red for Women Day as the kickoff to American Heart Month continues. So we come together on this day wearing red that's raising awareness about cardiovascular disease that affects nearly 59% of Black women 20 years of age and older. Welcome to FOXSOUL's Black Report. I'm Courtney Hicks.
And I'm Nicordelai Corte. Happy Friday. We are honored to stand behind this desk each day to take you on a journey across Black America and the stories that impact our people in a time such as this.
That's right. We're going to bring you our news, our views, and our voice. So let's get into today's top headline. The Congressional Black Caucus met with President Biden and Vice President Harris as they face pressure once again to overhaul police practices. Now, this comes as Memphis police officers beat Tyre Nichols during a traffic stop. He later died from the injuries, and those officers were charged with murder. The George Floyd Justice in Policing Act to combat these type of tragedies was installed in the Senate more than a year ago. At Nichols' funeral on Tuesday, you might remember Vice President Harris said the White House wants ambitious legislation to address the issue. And during that address at the funeral, she basically vowed that, hey, we got to get this passed. President Biden will sign it, and we will go forth with this legislation.
And it's really great to see the Congressional Black Caucus really putting their full strength behind this legislation yet again. Representative Steve Horsford, who's now the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, in a statement said, quote, "No one in our nation should fear interacting with police officers who serve our diverse communities, large and small. We all want to be safe. Many Black and brown people, however, and many young people in general, are justifiably afraid to interact with law enforcement officials. How much longer can our country continue to be united, the United States of America, if so many of us are afraid of our day-to-day interactions with law enforcement?"
Yeah, and how many more cases like Tyre Nichols has to happen? George Floyd, I thought George Floyd would do it, but how many more cases? And, you know, this legislation needs to be signed, and not only signed, but properly executed as it trickles out throughout police departments, because with this Tyre Nichols case, we see that this just wasn't a white thing, it wasn't a Black thing, it's a blue thing, and the culture. And my hope is that once this legislation is pushed through, signed, that it will address that culture that needs to be rethought, reimagined, retraining, all of the above. So we shall see.
And I just can't imagine for folks out there that think that there's nothing wrong with the culture. I mean, look at what happened after the death of Tyre. We reported on a story of an amputee, a double amputee in a wheelchair that was shot in the back by police officers. So if a double amputee is not safe in America, who is? Moving on, in a new report, it's being detailed that Memphis Police Chief Sherilyn Davis had a similar task force to the Scorpion Unit during her time in Atlanta. The Scorpion Unit was a specially formed group of officers that assisted in combating neighborhood crime and enlisted the officers responsible for Tyre Nichols' death. The report says that Chief Davis's unit in Atlanta, it was called the Red Dog Unit, and was a group of 30 officers sent out to high crime areas in the city. The unit was disbanded in, get this, 2011, after settling 10 lawsuits related to the Red Dog Unit. You know, Courtney, when I read this story, I couldn't help but wonder, what did she learn in Atlanta that she brought to the oversight of the Scorpion Unit on day one of her job in Memphis? And how many of these units exist across the country right now? I mean, really operating seemingly above the law.
You know, I remember a lot of these units, a lot of these squads coming to an existence during, you know, the crack days. They were, you know, specialized units to focus and zone in on crack-ridden areas. And we all know, you know, all of the rhetoric, the injustices, and the imbalance that came with that particular era. And you know, and then you have to move into, you modern day, where you have, police departments that are lacking, trainees, lacking folks to, come and be a part of the department, underfunding, which I think also has a direct relation to, why some of these officers aren't getting like a holistic approach when it comes to training. I mean, I want to say first and foremost, you're there to serve and then also protect. And so I knew that her past from Atlanta was probably going to come up and creep, but it'll be interesting to continue to follow as the days move on, if that in fact will come and haunt her in the sense of questioning her position in Memphis, and if she'll be able to hold on to it, and even if she does, if she'll be able to hold on to it with the community support.
But you know what, on the point of training, Courtney, this is another question that comes to mind to me. A lot of these officers have been trained. Mm-hmm. There were folks that were part of the Scorpion unit in Memphis that had been a part of the force for as little as 6 years, less than a decade, right? And so, how great is their police work where you get promoted to a special tactic unit like the Scorpion unit within 6 years, number one. Number two, they were supposedly trained. What happens when they don't adhere to any of that training? And we've got to be honest about the fact that training really doesn't mean much if people aren't adhering to the training, and if people aren't held accountable for operating outside of policy. And so, we'll continue to bring stories like this to you.
But those units should not be, in my opinion, policing and taking care of traffic stops.
Right.
I just, I think, the assignment is off as well. So that needs to be addressed too.
You're right. Mm-hmm. You're right. You're right. And there's a huge movement across the country to create these mental health units to respond to mental health disturbances. That wasn't the case in the Tyree Nichols case, but it has been the case in a number of cases, including the Keenan Anderson case in Los Angeles. And so, there are lots of proposed reforms to policing in America, but I'm not sure if reforms are enough. And I think there are a lot of people out there saying that you got to transform the whole dang thing. And so we'll continue to keep our eye on this.
We're going to switch gears here as one of Tatiana Jefferson's sisters has passed away. Amber Carr had been battling heart disease. She's the mother of Zion Carr. That's the 11-year-old who was with his aunt, Tatiana, the night she was shot and killed by former Fort Worth police officer Aaron Dean. This was back in 2019. The family's attorney posted on Twitter asking for continued prayers and support as Carr's two young sons deal with this loss.
A judge has delayed next week's scheduled execution of a man convicted of killing 3 teenagers while they slept in a Texas Panhandle home more than 25 years ago. 54-year-old John Ballentine had been set to receive a lethal injection at the state prison in Huntsville on February 8th. He was condemned for the January 1998 shooting death of a 17-year-old and 2 15-year-olds at a home in Amarillo. One of the victims was the brother of Ballentine's former girlfriend, and prosecutors said the shootings were the result of a feud. Ballentine was arrested in Houston 6 months after the slaying. The evidence at the trial showed that all 3 victims were shot once in the head as they slept in a tiny house where Ballentine also once lived.
All right, my goodness. It has been more than 3 months since the passing of Shanquilla Robinson in Mexico, and her family is still demanding justice. Now, according to the family, on February 18th, activists from Million Youth March of Charlotte and Robinson's family will march from Little Rock AME Zion Church to the local post office in that area to send 1,000 letters in pink envelopes to Mexican officials. The family says the hope is that sending the letters will ignite someone there to push a bit harder in bringing Shanquilla and her family justice. And, this is, ever since I jumped into journalism, if you will, that has just been my biggest push, follow up stories, because, as the public, as soon as we're sort of kind of done with it, it's a wrap for us and we move on. But these families and extended families and friends and communities, they are left with the fallout of whatever, the situation may be in Shanquilla's case. It has not been solved in the sense that these folks have not been fully brought to justice. I know there were some steps to get those involved back to Mexico, but, when you don't follow up, when you don't tap back into these stories, it just gets lost. And that's why, I think, programs like what we do here at Fox Soul's Black Report is so important, because it's still of interest to us. We still want to know what's happening, which is why we're bringing you this story here. But as you can see, that fight is still on. It's still on. And what's also really heartening to know is that there are a number of organizers on the ground who have made it their business to not allow her memory to fade from the headlines, to allow for the call for justice to be loud and to be clear. And so for them to be organizing this action to send, 1,000 of these letters to officials in Mexico to make sure that they don't forget about her and that they do their due diligence in investigating this case, I think this is a powerful demonstration of what it can look like when we say Black Lives Matter. Yeah, and I'm going to need the U.S. to step up too in any way that they can help to push this case forward. That's right. That's right. Well, a family is grieving the loss of a loved one found dead on the street of a residential neighborhood in Florida, and now police are looking for any clues that will point them to the possible suspect.
Very caring, very loving, willing to do anything for others, always up to do any obstacle that was challenging, very outgoing. She's going to be missed dearly. In her own words, the mother of Elena Sims described her daughter to me. She says the 22-year-old was the woman found lying dead last night in the Easton Park neighborhood with what police described as upper body trauma. They say she was just feet away from her young son, who was sleeping in a car seat. She loved her son a lot. He was her everything. So the memories I would have is the joyful moments that she had with her son. Police believe this was a targeted attack.
This is obviously a horrible tragedy for this family. You have a child now who's without a mother because someone took her life while the child was sitting right there in the car behind her as it happened.
They now hope someone comes forward so they can get this family closure.
We're hoping that someone in the community may have some sort of surveillance footage or may have seen a car coming and going that can help us find out who took her life.
Something Elena's family wants to see happen sooner than later, as another young life is tragically cut short in our city. She was a lovable soul. I mean, she didn't have to die young. She shouldn't have to die young. And everybody should know that, your loved ones, you want to keep them close because you just don't know.
Our thanks to Fox 13 Tampa for that story. According to Sim's mother, Alana was expecting her second child. And it's just so heartbreaking to have to bring you stories like this. But here's another update to a story we first brought you here on the Black Report in Detroit, Highland Park to be exact, a city within Detroit. There's been 3 bodies found, believed to be those of the Michigan rappers who recently have been reported missing. Take a look.
Michigan State Police, Detroit Police, and other law enforcement support teams working into Thursday's evening hours investigating this at least partially abandoned apartment complex at McNichols and Rosa Parks in Highland Park, where 3 bodies were discovered. Fox 2 sources believe it's the bodies of rappers missing since a Detroit concert they were set to play got scrapped almost 2 weeks ago. State Police said members of the Homicide Task Force, Metro South Post, and MSP Forensic Lab were combing through the scene with search warrants being obtained. 38-year-old Armani Kelly, 31-year-old Montoya Givens, and Dante Wicker, 31, were slated to perform at Lounge 31 on 7 Mile near Gratiot on January 21st. However, the event was canceled after organizers could not reach them on their phones. Fox 2 talked with Armani's mother the other day about her own efforts to find her son.
Somebody knows something. Somebody will speak. I don't know when, I don't know where, but it will come out.
We were able to pull phone data and see that there's no activity on any of their phones. They're not hitting any towers.
The mother of one of the victims the next day made a report of the missing person. That mother became very proactive in the investigation and started searching for her vehicle through OnStar.
Within days, the car Armani drove from Ascota to the Detroit area was discovered in Warren. That's when news reports prompted the families and friends of the missing 3 to ask questions.
On January 27th, information is aired through media on that individual, Mr. Kelly, and him being missing. And once that happens, other family members of the the other missings come to realize that that's a friend of their loved ones, and they haven't seen them either. So then they both get reported missing.
Wow. Our thanks to Dave Kinchin of Fox 2 right here in Detroit for that update. And you know, as following this story, because it became a huge national story as people wanted to know, you know, what had happened to those 3 rappers. We now know their investigators are looking at some footage, some online footage. One of those rappers went live, and it appears as though he was on, and there was a disagreement or some kind of argument or even threats between him and 2 other men. They are looking into that to see if that is in connection with their disappearance and now their murder. And so just an unfortunate turn of events. And that mom was so vigilant, so hopeful, but at the same time she knew, because her son had just went absent, that something was absolutely wrong. So her worst nightmare coming true, and it's just a very sad story here. And you know, all we can hope is that here in the state of Michigan, they have a strong witness protection program. You mentioned that this story has garnered national attention, and one of the issues that we don't talk enough about is there are a lot of witness protection programs that are not well funded, that are not as strong, and so there's no incentive for people to step up and share what they've seen. And so I hope that that's not the case here, and hopefully it gets to the bottom of this sooner than later. Well, we're learning more about the upcoming Grammy Awards tribute to Atlanta rapper Takeoff. It's being reported that the Migos group member Quavo will be on tap to pay respects to his nephew and fellow band member. Reports also say that Maverick City Music will join Quavo for the tribute. You'll remember Takeoff was killed last November while at a private event in Houston. I know that they are still healing, they're still reeling. I just saw a report not too long ago. There was another victim in that shooting, a young lady who was shot in the head, still recovering in Houston. She was talking about her and her mom was talking about her long road to recovery and what has, changed and how it has changed and will permanently change her life. So, we have a tendency to focus in on the celebrity, justifyingly so, but there were other victims in that particular situation that survived and are still in recovery. So that story is much bigger, and there's much more of a backstory than what happened with Takeoff. So just to keep that in mind as well. Yeah, and it serves as another reminder that the epidemic of gun violence affects all of us. Nobody's safe, and so whether you are a celebrity or just an everyday ordinary person, gun violence is an epidemic in this country. And I don't know how many times we've got to, really pay tribute to the lost and fallen until we as a country take it seriously and do everything we can to keep, these weapons off of the streets and out of the hands of people that don't mean us well. Indeed. Well, still ahead, the warning to Ticketmaster ahead of Beyonce's newly announced tour. You better not Taylor Swift them folks. The Beehive will come for you. Find out what the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee is telling the online ticket seller to ensure all fans get a fair shot at tickets. We'll be right back.